So I don't know if I was just better as Ron, or if it was that electric charge going through both of us. I mean, after all, in her mind, she was having sex with someone who had murdered a bunch of people, and I was having sex with someone who was clearly capable of having a lover killed.
Gary Johnson is a professor of psychology and philosophy at the University of New Orleans, USA. He teaches his students to live on the edge, to put themselves out there, and to get out of their comfort zone. Life is short, and one needs to live it on their own terms. Gary is a fun guy. He drives a Honda Civic like an everyday normal human. He gets home to meet his companions, 2 cats he named ID and Ego. After feeding them, he sits quietly to have his own meal, peacefully. It's revealed that Gary also loves working on electronics and has a part-time job at the police department, which initially involves installing CCTV cameras and microphones at potential crime scenes, and sometimes shooting. While doing his work, a colleague, known as Sandra, comes up with news. She reveals that one of their colleagues has been suspended after a video went viral of him physically assaulting 2 teenagers. The chief of police wants Gary to be his replacement as an undercover contract killer. Gary isn't ready to play any role at the moment, because he's scared, and asks Sandra if they should reschedule the meeting in order for him to prep himself. Sandra insists that the operation must continue. A fellow officer encourages him to go for it, and since he's been watching a lot of Hitman movies, he's going to do great at impersonating one. However, Gary tells Scott to play the role, since he understands how to be a hitman, but Scott refuses, saying that he was the chosen one, and besides, they are there to watch his back. If anything goes wrong, they would help him. Gary reluctantly meets Jasper in his car, where he was complaining about his suspension, which would last at least 120 days. At that moment, Gary reveals to Jasper that he would be his replacement for the meantime and asks for some advice on how to play the hitman role. Jasper feels that Gary isn't much of a threat to his job, considering his appearance, and would return to his role once his suspension expires. He doesn't hesitate and gives him some crucial advice. Although he has to change his shorts to something better to appear more professional, thereby borrowing Scott's trousers for the meantime. He gets to the restaurant where the suspect is sitting. At first, Gary looks nervous and starts by making the suspect comfortable with him by acting tough. He poses as a potential hitman to convince the suspect to say some incriminating words that would give the police enough evidence to arrest him for attempted murder. After making sure he'd spilled the beans, Gary collects the bounty and heads outside. Within moments, the guy is arrested by the police for attempted murder. He gets to his colleagues, and they are amazed at how he was able to pull himself together to make the tough guy talk. Gary is now open to the world of Hitman. He dresses up to meet everyone's ideal fantasy of a hitman. He encounters different types of potential clients who either want their life partner dead, their friend dead, and even a kid who wants her mom dead. He doesn't have enough funds, so he adds a couple of PS4 DVD games for payment. Well, you can imagine. He gets a lot of calls from people who wanted someone dead. Some who couldn't pay the ransom end up trading their personal belongings, like a speedboat, or maybe adding their body for compensation, just like our old lady here. Well, at least Gary was happy with his role. While teaching in his class, his ex-wife Alice pays him a visit, and she is already pregnant. Gary, without his roleplay, looks like a nerd. Although Alice is married to another guy now, he still talks to her calmly, not minding their past. Alice is irritated by his lifestyle with his cats and advises him to at least get a lady in his life. However, Gary seems happy with his single life and adds that he wants to lock in. Alice advises that he needs 2 things currently in his life: a therapist and a girlfriend. Gary is later given a file on a woman named Madison. He looks her up on Facebook and sees she doesn't seem to have a history before her marriage to her husband Ray, and she has no criminal record. Gary meets with Madison in a diner under the alias Ron. She is planning to have Ray killed because she can no longer deal with being married to him. Gary quickly becomes normal with Madison and then talks her out of giving him the money to kill Ray so that she will not implicate herself. Instead, Gary convinces her to take the money and start a new life. Claudette and Phil, who've been listening to them all this while, express dismay at Gary for letting her go. Meanwhile, Jasper returns from his suspension, but is none too happy to learn that the sergeant prefers Gary doing his job, and that the police would rather have Jasper hidden to protect their reputation after the video of him beating this teenager is still viral. Later on, Madison texts Ron and invites him to a dog adoption fair, even though Gary is a cat person. He meets Madison at the park, where she tells him that she is divorcing Ray, and she finds that Gary comes off less as a menacing hitman and more of a people person, since Gary gets along with the dogs and the kids at the park. Gary and Madison then go out later before going back to her place to go do some dirty. The two then continue their relationship while Gary doesn't let his superiors know about it. While out on a date with Madison, she and Gary are spotted by a drunk Ray and his friend. Ray gets pissed at seeing Madison with another guy. When he threatens to strike Madison, Gary pulls a gun on him, making Ray back off. Gary and Madison go to get some food, and inside the car Madison is delighted on how he defended her from Ray, while having a good time and enjoying the moment, only for Gary to get nervous when he sees Jasper. Jasper approaches Gary and Madison, only addressing Gary as an old coworker, but not revealing the truth to Madison. Gary is then called to play Hitman again for a client calling himself Mike. Mike turns out to be Ray, as he wants Gary to kill Madison and her new boyfriend. Gary then turns around and reveals himself to Ray and scares him out of the diner before he can implicate himself. Once he's outside, he tells his team that Ray was too scared of going to prison. He decides to cancel the deal. Jasper isn't convinced and thinks Gray is hiding something from them. Gary doesn't want to talk about it, so he thanks him for not blowing his cover last night. He then goes to Madison's house to warn her that Ray wants her dead. Since he revealed his face to him, he would look for other means to delete them both. Madison says she isn't scared since she has a badass hitman who can protect her, and begins to flirt with Gary, ignoring his warnings. Sometime later at the station, Gary is informed by the sergeant that Ray has been found dead after an apparent drug deal gone bad. He goes to find Madison to tell her, only for her to reveal to Gary that she shot and killed Ray after Gary told her he wanted her dead. Gary then comes out and reveals he was never a hitman and that he has been lying to Madison. She gets mad and orders him to leave. The police then name Madison as the prime suspect in Ray's murder, as they learn that Ray had increased his life insurance policy by $1 million, and Madison was the sole beneficiary. They plan to have Gary go in and get Madison to confess to the murder while they have him wired, unaware that she knows the truth about him now. Gary goes to Madison's house again, only for him to use his phone to quietly let her know the police are listening to them. He gets Madison to put on a show and deny everything, convincingly getting the police off their backs for now. When Gary tries to go to Madison's house again, he finds Jasper there, as he is planning to blackmail them for a cut of Ray's insurance policy. Madison gets Jasper a beer, and as he begins ranting to them about his plan, he starts to get weaker until he eventually passes out, since Madison drugged his beer. As she worries about drugging a cop, Gary puts a plastic bag over Jasper's head and tells Madison they will stage his murder as a suicide, since Jasper is already known to be a junkie asshole that nobody is going to miss. They also admit their love for one another. Jasper then takes his last breath and stops moving. Years later, Gary has moved his class to a bigger room, as he has gained more students. He is now married to Madison and has 2 kids with her, along with 2 dogs. Their daughter asks them how they met. Gary and Madison don't say the whole story, but make it seem like they had a nice cute meeting at a cafe where they changed each other's lives. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe.